Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Nurturing Healthy Eaters webinar hosted by Newton. We're just going to give people a couple minutes to join into the webinar, and then we will be getting started right away.
Hey, Karen.
All righty. What do you think, Amanda? Are we good to go?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so welcome everybody to the first Newton webinar titled Nurturing Healthy Eaters. This is going to be the first webinar of hopefully many that are eventually going to be stored on the newton.ca website. For future webinars, you can hop onto our mailing list to be kept in the loop as to which ones we're going to be doing next. So to kick things off here, I would like to start by acknowledging that we work, live, and play on Treaty 1 territory, the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. Our team at Newton acknowledges that there are many ways of knowing and approaches that shape our relationship with food. This guides the work that we do. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we jump in. So you're going to find handouts available in the chat box that Amanda is going to graciously put in there. Feel free to download those at any point during the workshop, and I'll remind you again at the end as well. Please ensure that your microphone is muted to reduce any background noise. We will be saving all the questions till the end, which you can ask in the Q&A, and then we'll be answering those at the end. And the recording, as I mentioned earlier, will be available shortly on our website at newton.ca. So to start off with some introductions. So my name is Tressa Beaulieu. I am a registered dietitian, a Métis woman with Oji-Cree ancestral ties to Lac St. Anne. I went to university at the U of M, originally from Thunder Bay, Ontario, and moved here 10 years ago. So I've kind of been sucked into the Winnipeg vortex, and I've stayed now, which I love. I'm employed with Newton part-time as a nutrition educator, and I also own a side business called Red Horse Connection, which is why I have a picture of me and a horse. I'm going to pass this over to my colleague, Amanda.
Well, we're glad you stayed in Winnipeg, Tressa. Hey, everybody. My name is Amanda Hamill. I am a white settler here in Treaty 1 territory. I am able-bodied. My pronouns are she, her, and I have the privilege of being food secure. I have access to clean running water and food. And I've been a dietitian since 2013, and I'm super excited and happy to be a nutrition educator with Newton. Great to see everybody here. So enough about us. We want to learn a little bit more about each of you here today. So we have a super quick poll that we'll share on the screen here. If you could just tell us what your role is in the nutrition space. So take a moment to answer the poll question there. So great to see a variety of people here today. Excellent. So we will end that there. And it looks like we have people from all over, which is exciting. So thank you so much for joining us today. All right. So for those of you who haven't heard of Newton, who is Newton? It's kind of a funny word, but it stands for Nutrition Plus Education. And our goal through Newton, we are a small team of dietitians, and we are dedicated to providing training and nutrition programs to mostly Manitoba educators, so early childhood educators and teachers, so that they can help their kids and students feel more comfortable around food and eating. And we hope to do this by encouraging educators to explore food. So hands-on food activities is probably the best way that we know how to learn about food. And so in true dietitian fashion, we love a good recipe. So before we dive in, we thought it would be a good idea to share our perspective and approach when it comes to nutrition education here at Newton. So we have our recipe for nutrition education includes 4 ingredients to make a difference. So eating competence, food literacy, body acceptance, and food journeys. And I'll walk you through each of these really, really quickly. So this little slide here just shows a bigger picture view of each of those 4 ingredients coming together. And so the first ingredient is eating competence. And in a nutshell, this means building a more positive relationship with food and eating. It's about supporting kids and families in their lifelong journey towards navigating this really complex world of food that we live in. And as I mentioned, to us, it's about encouraging kids and adults alike to frame food and eating in a more positive way, to enjoy variety, and to also take time to eat and to trust our hunger, fullness, and satiety cues. All right, so the next ingredient is food literacy rather. And we really aim to help kids develop the skills and the confidence to choose and enjoy a variety of different foods for both nourishment, but also pleasure. That's just as important. And so, as I mentioned, experiential opportunities with food are key to having that rich learning experience with food. The third ingredient is body acceptance, and this is simply understanding that every body is a good body. It means that we recognize that healthy bodies come in all shapes and sizes, and we encourage both kids and adults to use body positive language that's both inclusive and non-judgmental. And the last ingredient, to kind of tie it all together, we understand that everyone is on their own food and body journey, and we aim to help kids gain knowledge, skills, and a positive perspective to shape their own food journey as they learn and grow. And we try to do this through our programs and resources, and hopefully you can see that throughout this webinar. So we really strive to celebrate the unique food stories and the diverse lived experiences of families and communities. So that's how our 4 ingredients come together, and at the heart of it is Newton, so we are here to help you on this big food journey, if you will. And lastly, we think it's important that you understand that we use Ellen Satter's eating competence model in the work that we do as well. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Ellen Satter, she is a feeding guru. She's a registered dietitian and a family therapist, And she has a lot of research and evidence to support this more relaxed approach to developing more positive relationships with food and body. So that's the basis of what our programs and resources are embedded in. And one more thing before we dive in, I know there's a lot of kind of background information, but we think it's important to kind of get at all this background information before we get into nurturing healthy eaters. So as you know, the title of this webinar is Nurturing Healthy Eaters, but what does that actually mean? What does it mean to be a healthy eater? So imagine that you are having dinner with friends and their kids. What specific things might the kids do to make you describe them as healthy or good eaters, for example? Is it maybe a certain behavior? Is it how much they eat? Is it trying all the foods on their plate? Is it something else? Now, you don't have to answer this in the chat box by any means, but just take some time to reflect on this question here. So we are going to explore this exact topic, and our goal is that by the end of this presentation, we can all become a little bit more curious about what it means to be a healthy eater and all the ways that we can support kids in building a positive, more nurturing relationship with food and their bodies. So maybe we can consider that being a healthy eater is more than just the types and amount of food a kid eats. So to us, healthy eating, as you'll see it's in quotes there for us, is a very individual concept, and it focuses on a long-term positive relationship with food and body versus the short term, which would be, let's just get kids to eat healthy, if you will. So in general, it means that most of the time kids find value and satisfaction in eating. So food has to be joyful and relaxed. It means eating a variety of foods and also gaining the skills to learn to like new foods or not. So it's about preferences. It also means having reliable meals and snacks with enough time to eat, which we'll chat about later on. But most importantly, it means that kids are supported to let their own feelings of hunger, satisfaction, and fullness guide how much they need to eat to grow into the bodies that are right for them. And this has a lot to do with trust. So we will chat about that later as well. So don't forget that in the chat box, you have a few handouts to download. We have our Nurturing Healthy Eaters series from all the way from early learning and childcare to early and middle years and senior years. So please note that even though these are somewhat geared towards a daycare or childcare and school setting, they are definitely applicable for a variety of different settings, such as the home setting. And so we'll walk through, if you fall asleep during this webinar, think of this as your cheat sheet. So we will walk through each of the components in these handouts. So let's chat about the division of responsibility. It's maybe perhaps the most important thing we can do to nurture healthy eaters in this long-term approach. So let's dive into the DOR, if you will. So this is an Ellen Satter concept, and it's where the adult is responsible for the what, when, and where a child eats. So in other words, the structure of eating. The child or the adolescent is responsible for how much and whether they eat. So they are really in control of their own body. So they listen to their hunger and fullness and satiety cues to determine how much, or sometimes how little, from our perspective, they need to eat to grow into the bodies that are right for them. So at the end of the day, this really is about trust. It's about trusting kids to listen to their bodies and to be responsible for their own bodies and what their body is telling them. And we know that kids, especially let's say they're going through a growth spurt, their appetites fluctuate quite considerably from day to day or even from morning to night. So it's completely normal for appetites to fluctuate. And sometimes kids may choose to eat what we consider as adults a little bit. And then other days they might choose to eat what we as adults consider a lot. So we just need to trust the process and take a bit of a step back. So to put it in another way, the role of the adult in this mealtime relationship is, you can think of it in a number of different ways. So first and foremost, we want to honor the division of responsibility and honor the fact that everyone has a role to play when it comes to food and eating. Next, what we can do as adults is we can choose, well, it's our job rather, to choose and to prepare the food. What you can do though is consider. So you can consider a child's preferences, so their likes or dislikes. However, you don't want to fall into the trap of being, let's say, a short order cook. So you don't want to make 10 different meals for every single child. That's not sustainable. And it's perfectly fine to have a few familiar foods in what you're serving, in addition to maybe one or two new foods that you want to expose kids to. Again, if we're following the division of responsibility, it means that adults, we're responsible for the when and the where. So that structure in providing regular meals and snacks is super important. Kids really thrive off of structure. And if ever possible, avoid grazing in between meals and just giving out handouts, let's say to stop a screaming child, giving them a handout to stop their behavior. In the long term, that really doesn't support that relationship with food. Next, we want to, and we'll talk about this more later, we want to make the mealtime environment as pleasant as possible. So we'll chat about that in a moment. And as adults, our job is to also not only provide the what, when, and where, but also to set an example. So to be a role model when it comes to things like, let's say, mealtime etiquette. So yes, please, no, thank you, washing our hands, that kind of thing. And of course, I mentioned this earlier, but we want to trust kids to eat what is right for them, to grow up into the bodies that are right for them, and nobody can determine that is largely out of our control. So how does this look? How does the division of responsibility look in a variety of different settings? So let's say childcare, for example. So that the facility rather is responsible for the when and where. So again, that structure piece. And sometimes they are also responsible for the what. So what foods are served. And this will depend on the facility. So when foods come from home, then of course the family takes on that responsibility of what foods are served. But at the end of the day, it's up to the child to decide, based on what is provided to them, how much or whether they eat. And very similarly in a school setting, for example, again, the school is responsible for that time and place. So again, it's the structure piece, which is super important. And sometimes, let's say, if there's a meal program or a snack program, the school is also responsible for the what. And then obviously, if families are the ones providing meals and snacks, they take on the responsibility of the what. And again, students are responsible for deciding, okay, based on what's provided to me, I get to decide how much and whether I eat. So that is the division of responsibility in a nutshell. Let's dive into how to create or promote rather, a more positive eating environment. And Rosie, I'm glad you can hear us now. That's great. So there are a number of things we can do here. The first thing, again, it really circles back to the division of responsibility. So we want to trust kids to eat as much or as little as they need to based on what is provided. So again, that's the division of responsibility. We want to have that structure. So maybe every few hours, typically 2 to 3 hours, we can offer a meal or snack. And, a school or a daycare setting is a perfect example of this because there's usually those protected meal times, so lunchtime and snack time. This is a hard one. So if possible, have a distraction-free meal environment. So that means no iPads, no electronics, books are off the table. I know it's super hard to do in our really busy lives, but the least amount of distractions, the more the focus becomes on kids being able to do their job, which is to decide how much to eat. Some other things you might consider in setting up a more positive meal environment could be maybe some posters or visuals, or maybe even some light music that kind of sets the stage for a relaxed environment. So we can chat about more on this later. And then in the chat box, we also left what we hope is a helpful guide for mealtime conversations. So the bottom line here is that we don't want to have conversations about nutrition per se. It's better to have casual conversations that are not necessarily food related. So we've provided a handout in the chat box to help guide you with some of those questions to keep the mealtime as positive as possible. And then, of course, I mentioned that adults play a big role in modeling mealtime etiquette. And as adults in the room here, we know that having some level of etiquette is a skill. It's a skill that we learn as we get older. So we don't want to go into a restaurant and start screaming and crying when we don't get the food that we want. So that's why it's important to show kids what proper mealtime etiquette looks like. And not to worry, we will pop into the chat box the handouts again at the very end. So if you can't see it right now, don't worry about that. All right, so one quick poll to kind of test your knowledge a little bit about what is a proper, or what is a more maybe appropriate mealtime conversation you can have with kids. So let's launch into that. So the first question here is, what would not be an appropriate mealtime conversation topic? Is it about, so it's not. So is it about favorite foods, healthy and unhealthy foods? Is it about your favorite superhero, mealtime etiquette? What is not an appropriate mealtime conversation topic? I'm hoping that this is working. There we go. That one was easy. Okay, and the second question, is it appropriate to talk to kids about good and bad foods? Looks like we're all across the board here. What is an appropriate mealtime conversation topic? So we have a couple of different answers for that one. So where food comes from and food groups. And then lastly, casual mealtime conversations makes eating fun and relaxed. That is definitely true. Perfect. Thank you guys for participating in that. Okay. Perfect. And I will pass it to Tressa.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so following that poll question or questions, we're going to be jumping into the third part of that Nurturing Healthy Eaters handout, which is all about natural hunger and fullness cues. So you may already know, but kids have an innate ability to regulate their hunger and fullness cues. I always bring this back to a newborn, for example. Do they know when it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, or 2 snacks during the day? No, right? They're hungry when they're hungry, and they're going to eat when they eat. So how can adults support this once we're moving from that infancy stage and into that more structured piece to our meal routine? This is all back again, relates to the division of responsibility in the way of trust. So allowing kids to control their own intake. We want to make sure that we're not specifying a certain number of bites or how many they should be taking. We also want to allow kids to eat food in any order they choose. So there's no need to finish one food before another. And this definitely relates to, for example, like a lunchbox when it comes from home within the childcare setting or at school. Again, we want to trust and respect students and children when they say or signal that they are full or still hungry or not hungry, right? They know their bodies best. And as Amanda mentioned earlier, this concept of grazing. So making sure that we aren't providing food handouts in between our meals and snacks. There's going to be a little question on this later as to why this is. So take some time. Why would we not want a child to graze throughout the day? What would this do to their appetite? When we talk about this idea of taking a certain number of bites or policing what order foods are being ate in, this is also known as food pressure or food policing. Some examples, as they can be disguised in some ways, and we've all said them before in some way or another. So just something to keep in mind. We would want to avoid food pressure, and this can look like saying things like finish your plate, having that X number of bites, commenting on how much or how little somebody is eating, talking about just hunger and fullness cues in general in a way that we won't actually know if a child is like how they feel on the inside. So just being cognizant of that. Saying something like you can't leave the table until you finish whatever it may be that is on the plate. It also relates to the order, right? So eating this before that within a lunch. Or evaluating the food based on which one we deem as being, in quotation mark again, healthy versus another food. So when we are talking about food pressure and this idea of food policing, knowing now that we have children and kids have that innate ability to regulate their appetite, when we're adding this pressure, what can that do, right, to a child's natural hunger and fullness cues? So we have a poll question here that I'm going to launch. Right here, okay. So what would interfere with a child's natural ability to regulate their appetite? So based on some of the examples we were talking about earlier. Amanda, I think our questions are too easy.
You might be onto something there, Tressa.
Yeah. We're not holding back next time. Awesome. So I'm getting some some answers in here. I'm going to end our poll and share our results. Okay, so what would interfere with a child's natural abilities? So this one here, so it's all of the above. So everyone was right in this way, because any of these techniques that we might use within feeding children can interfere with a child's natural ability to regulate their appetite, because we're not trusting them to know their own bodies best, right? So we do need to trust children. Great job. Okay. So this brings us into this idea of trust that we keep talking about over and over again. So not only with children and kids and students, but also with families. So when we are talking about building trust with kids and families, we want to seek to understand and respect cultural food differences. As we've mentioned a few times today, the word healthy means different things to different people, right? And this comes out in ways like food that is coming from home, for example. When foods are coming from home, we want to allow kids to eat all those foods that are sent from home. This can be a tough one sometimes, and within workshops, we get lots of comments and questions about maybe being worried about the foods that are coming from home. But we're also here to acknowledge that we don't always know the reasons why certain foods are put in a kid's lunch, right? There may be many examples like time restraints, knowledge of food skills, financial, food insecurity, family chaos, right? Maybe there's lots of kids in that home, and getting those kids to school can be one of a big job in that morning. So we just also want to reassure that doing what you can do, and that is through, again, that division of responsibility and all the things that we're talking about today with promoting positive eating environments. So one way that we like to think about is, instead of taking away, so whether that be something out of a child's lunch, consider what we can add. Is that through food exploration activities within your facility or at your school? Can we add different things like activities where we're exploring the diversity within families and the foods that they provide, right? Of course, when we are faced with certain things like food insecurity and things like that, we do have some resources that we can provide as well. There's a PDF resource for nutrition advice and supports too, that if we do need to support families in need. Just making sure, again, that we're not singling families out in this, and that is something that goes to all families, unless, of course, a family approaches you with questions about this. So, thinking about celebrating the diversity and unique food stories within our feeding and eating environments, right? Whether that be childcare or school. This is a fun little video here about what does the world eat for breakfast, and just a really great way to put that into a video. Okay. I swear I've seen this video several times, but there's music with it. And I'm not sure if you could hear it, but I was definitely dancing over here. So this can be a great video if that's something that you want to share with your students as well, or provide as a resource during a unit if you are celebrating those unique food stories. Okay, so we've talked about the promoting positive food environments. We've also chatted about the natural hunger and fullness cues. And then now we're going to be talking about exploring food in a fun way. So thinking about those activities as we were mentioning before. So a lot of times when we are exploring foods, and whether that be at snack, meal times, or within a specific, like a special activity, it's a lot about how we talk about food and eating, right? It's not so much sometimes about the food all the time. So when talking about food and exposing children and students to foods, we want to do this in a neutral way. So when I say neutral, it's again about how we talk about foods. But we want to keep it simple and factual. We want to focus on using non-evaluative language. And a great way to kind of think about non-evaluative language at maybe an early years level would be using the 5 senses as guidance. So our senses like smell, taste, things like that, hearing about it. Kids are sponges, so how we talk about foods is very important in how we promote a positive relationship with foods as they grow and learn. So to talk about non-evaluative language, before I jump into some examples of what we can use, I also like to mention things we might want to avoid using when we talk about food and eating. So examples of evaluative language would be commenting on foods in ways such as we're labeling them as healthy versus unhealthy, good versus bad, clean versus junk food. When we evaluate how often a food, in quotation marks, should or shouldn't be consumed. That idea of real versus not real or whole foods, right? So some questions to reflect on as I'm chatting about these evaluative language terms. Why would we want to avoid using this language when talking about food and eating, right? What's the difference between saying it's good, isn't it? And how do you like it after a kid tries a new food? You'll notice that most of these, when we are talking about them, are very subjective, right? It's our own opinions surrounding food. Whereas if we say something like, how do you like it? We're allowing the child to an opportunity to form their own opinion, right? When we use terms like this in evaluative language, we're setting the stage for judgment of foods and also inherently the individual for eating that food, right? If something's bad, then if I eat it, does that mean I'm bad, right? So thinking about and reflecting on that. So those are some examples of evaluative language. Here are some examples of non-evaluative language, things that, as you can see, a little thumbs up at the bottom of the screen. We can start to explore ways to sort and categorize foods. And no, I don't mean based on the food guide. I'm talking about those physical attributes of foods, like their color, those with seeds, the size of foods. There's so many different types of bread, for example, at the bottom, that one of the pictures there, ways that we can sort and categorize, right? We also can look at food ecology. So where does food come from, right? We can progress that as kids get older too. We can talk about they come from plants or an animal when kids are young. And then as we get older, yes, things can get a little bit more, I guess, abstract, but it's still keeping that simple and factual and not so much subjective information. We can talk about animals that eat these foods, so like blueberries and bears, for example, how different foods can be prepared, like cooking an egg. So these are some more kind of early years examples, and I've mentioned a couple that would be as you progress into older kids, but older kids above 12 years and older would be, we can start to introduce nutrition education. So we're moving from teaching about food into more of that idea of nutrition education. when we do this, we still want to be neutral and factual in our information. So doing so in a neutral and factual way would be talking about the roles that nutrients play in the body. So examples would be fiber's role in digestion, calcium's role in building strong bones, things like that. So based on these, some examples that we've been talking about and looking at these, what are some activities that maybe you've done with the kids in your care? Maybe it's your own children, maybe it's students of yours. So using the chat box, we're going to have a little brainstorm activity. What are some ways to involve kids in food-related activities based on these kind of non-evaluative concepts? So we'll give people, oh, there's Amanda. So Amanda's writing, please share here. What are some ways to involve kids in food-related activities? Let them meal plan with you. Okay, following a recipe and cooking and baking together. Yes, that's huge. There's so many pieces to cooking and baking, right? Grocery shopping, okay. Okay, so using grocery shopping as kind of an opportunity to expose children to a variety of foods. That would be great, right? So we can look at all the different apples that are set up in the fruit section, for example, or in different apples, yeah. Growing a garden with the children. Yes, I love that. That's a great way to show where food comes from and the different phases of growth, right, for food, and how when we care for that too. Like there's a lot of great things with growing a garden. Sensory play, yep. So getting those senses involved, yeah, and that doesn't stop, right, at like in early years. Like play should always, it can be the focus as kids age as well, right? Trying different foods. We do that as adults as well, right? We get together for potlucks or things like that, and we're tasting and smelling and cooking together. What else do we have here? Gardening, yeah. Learn about food and try them from other cultures, yes. Food art, very fun, yeah. Great. Brianna, I got a good food art one coming up for you here. These are all really great examples, everybody. So moving into here, so thank you so much for sharing. So these are just some pictures of our different programs that we have at Newton, and Amanda's going to chat about those very shortly, just so you can see some different kids that we have going on for our programs. This here, a little bit of food art. I like to think of this as food art. So this is our Pinterest page. So if you are looking for something that's a little bit spooky or fun for your students, and this is something you can make together as well. We have snackspirations, we call them, for all different holidays, different occasions. So I'm going to pass this over back to Amanda.
So fun. Thank you, everybody, for sharing all of those great ways to explore food. I love it. So now we'll move into kind of the final part of our presentation today, which is how can Newton support you? So as I mentioned earlier, Newton is here to help primarily educators, so teachers and early childhood educators, but we also wanted to share some of the offerings that we have for health professionals and families and caregivers as well. So to start off, we'll first talk about some of the educator programs that we offer. So we have programs ranging from early childhood all the way to middle years for the time being. So each of our programs, they're classroom-based or facility-based. For our school age programs, they're also curriculum-based, and they achieve outcomes in math, literacy, health and phys ed, social studies, science, and beyond. And I mean, maybe we're a little bit biased here, but we think that our programs are pretty fun and engaging as well. So this is our kind of a snapshot of all of our programs. So you can see in the top left-hand corner here, We have our Little Food Explorers program, which is available to early childhood educators. We have our K1, or kindergarten and grade 1 program, which is called Food Explorers. So yes, the names are very similar, but they're for different age groups there. Our grade 2, 3, and our grade 4 programs are currently under construction, but we can assure you that it will be well worth the wait when we release our new programs for those grades. So stay tuned for that. Our grade 5 program is called Power to Grow. Our grade 6 program is called Powerful Bones, and our grade 8 program is called Power to Be. And we are also hoping to develop some high school programs as well. So lots going on, and we're really excited to release some new stuff for our educators. One thing to know, though, is that in order to gain access to these programs for your to use with your kids and students, is that you have to attend a virtual workshop with us. So we can pop into the chat box the link to register for either a teacher workshop or an early childhood educator workshop, so that you can gain access to these programs.
Amanda, we just had a question from Anne about, she's in Alberta.
Oh yeah, I'm practicing in Alberta. I wonder if I can use, oh, that's a great question. Well, Anne, we actually have some amazing colleagues that we work with in Alberta who have pretty similar programs to us. So I'm happy to connect with you and share more about that with you, perhaps after the presentation. So we can share with you our email address there. Thanks for that. Okay, so in addition to our programs, perfect, thanks Tressa, we will pay you to use our programs essentially. So we have a variety of mini food grants available. And the purpose of these grants is to give you the opportunity to purchase ingredients or supplies that you need in order to put our programs into action in your classroom or daycare. So these grants are available for some select programs. So you will learn more about that after attending our educator workshops. One of the things that we recently put into action this year as a response to this pandemic that we're all living through is our loyalty grant. So not sure if you know this, but here at Newton, we also have a school milk program, sector. And so we partnered together with the school milk program, as well as the Child Nutrition Council of Manitoba. And we developed this grant as a top-up grant, because we know that, kind of near the end of the school year, funds are really short and tight. So we wanted to be able to provide a way to top up those funds so that kids could continue to have meal and snack programs ongoing. So we will be launching this grant again in the new year. And then Anne, you said, are these grants available for Alberta applicants? So a little side note, our colleagues in Alberta are also going to be launching mini food grants. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for that question. And I'll pass it back to you, Tressa.
Great. Okay, so Amanda mainly talked about what was available for educators, such as teachers, early childhood educators. This is a little bit for our healthcare professionals that are with us today, and maybe also they might double as parents and caregivers, or maybe we have just some parents and caregivers on as well. So Newton, we offer a variety of free resources for download, or you can order these on our website, physical copies as well. So the picture on the right-hand side is what the website page looks like, and you can find it at the top bar of newton.ca. Some other things that we are starting to offer, because these are questions that were coming up lots for us. What do we have for families and parents and things like that? Because most of our programs were geared to educators. So One thing that we are starting, and this is again our first webinar of hopefully many, are these webinars. So that's going to be something that's kept on our website as public access, so anybody can go onto the website. Amanda also shared again in the chat box there for registering for workshops. That is the link there, and that again is for Manitoba only. And again, more to come. So we are always updating our professional resources page. If you are on our mailing list, we also launch through campaigns as well. So you can keep an eye out through that. So where to turn for reliable nutrition advice? This was something I mentioned earlier. So when we're looking to support families or maybe ourselves too, and learning a little bit more about whether it be early learning and childcare and nutrition surrounding that or within schools, this list here is obviously not exhaustive in its form, but it's something that we put together as hopefully kind of like a quick summary or an easy thing to click if you are looking for specific resources underneath those different titles, whether it be Indigenous and newcomer programs and resources, childcare nutrition supports, as well as school nutrition supports. If you have any that you think would be a good addition to this list, please let us know because we are always adding to it. So we're coming to the final stages of this webinar. And one thing that will be popping up as a post-evaluation survey is just this one question. So we're not going to bombard you with a huge survey, but we do have this one question, and it is, what is one thing you will put into practice as a result of attending this webinar? So before you sign off for the day, just taking some time just to quickly fill in this question for us would be amazing. So some final thoughts here. So this is a quote by Ellen Satter that sums up a lot of the different topics that we were talking about today. So feeding children isn't about getting food into them. It's about letting them learn how to eat. Now, as we've talked about throughout this webinar, and Amanda is so quick. She's like a little tech guru. I love it because I am not. So she is plunking in all those handouts for you again if you missed them at the beginning of the webinar. This is the Nurturing Healthy Eaters series, goes from early learning and childcare, early and middle years, and then we also have a senior years handout. Then we also have that Where to Turn for Reliable Nutrition Information PDF and the Mealtime Conversations starters as well. And those starters are actually part of a full series of lesson plans as well that you will find on the Newton.ca website if you're looking for other things to download too. So be sure to check that out. So thank you so much for attending our webinar today. It was really fun. We were a little nervous going in, but we feel great coming out. I do anyways. I don't know about you, Amanda. But this is going to be our opportunity here for some questions before we sign off for the day. So you can write your questions in the Q&A or the chat box, whatever you prefer. And if you have any questions after the fact too, feel free to send us an email at newton@milk.mb.ca. Thank you, Colette.
Thank you, everybody.
I think Naomi has a question here from earlier.
Oh, yeah.
So what happens when the child, in our case, our sons, have meltdowns? For example, when they don't want any food served, even if it is safe food is offered, but then want a snack 20 minutes later and we say kitchen is closed, then epic meltdown. They say they're starving, so we let them eat. Amanda, I'm gonna let you take that away. Yeah.
That's a tough one. Oh gosh, meltdowns are never easy to deal with. So I'm sending you lots of compassion, Naomi. I know it's so frustrating. I would say maybe ask yourself, are there boundaries set up? So I love that you have that the kitchen is closed. The other thing that might be happening though is maybe your son is holding out for that snack because they know that that snack is going to come, because if I push mom and dad's buttons, that snack is going to come. So I'm not sure how long this has been going on for, but it is really important to have those boundaries so that eventually, and it takes time, eventually your son might kind of tune into the fact that, okay, I do have to wait until the next offering or the next meal or snack is available. So what you could do is offer that reassurance. So you say the kitchen's closed, but at X time is when we're all going to sit down together and have, let's say, a bedtime snack together. So you can make it kind of like a more relaxed thing. Maybe it's something you do together and actually take the time to do. Maybe you have some of those conversations that we put into the chat box. So I think bottom line is boundaries are really important. The other thing is, if it is a really, we don't know the full story here, so I'm hesitant to provide too much advice. If it really is a huge issue of, like, it's just a long-term issue, you might want to consider seeking out the help of a dietitian. Anything to add there, Tressa?
No, I think you did a wonderful job with that.
And yeah, Naomi, if you have any questions, if you're looking for dietitians in Manitoba, for example, feel free to email us at newton.ca and we can help you find a dietitian. Thanks, everybody. Any other questions? Thanks, Katie.
I recognize the Katie Addison name.
Oh, she's a Newton booster for sure. Thanks, Katie.
Love it.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, again, we want to thank everybody for attending our webinar today. Again, first of hopefully many, and we'll keep you in the loop with our next ones coming. Yes, again, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day today. Recording will be available on the newton.ca website in due time. And if you have any questions that come to you after the fact, please feel free to send us an email at newton@milk.mb.ca. Have a great day.
Bye.